So here goes. I'm gonna talk about or rant about something for a while that's very difficult for me to talk about, and it interweaves in a lot of different areas, like within itself, and because it's part of my life and my experience, and that's what I'm going to talk about, is my experience with not only anxiety and depression, but my DID, or MPD as it was once referred to as. I was going to record myself having a very deep episode. I was, fairly lucid. I was going to describe the dissociations, what was going on as I was switching, and I still might, if I talk about it, it might come back. But I was starting to get pretty incoherent and didn't think it would do very much good. And I was hoping to shed some light on a few things, not only for my own personal healing, but hopefully this will help others in their own healing as well. So, whenever I think of DID, I usually think of MKUltra. And usually when people ask me about DID, they ask me if I've heard of MKUltra, or ask me what I know about it. There's a lot of things that I wish I could say about it. And throughout this series, I may say more about that topic too. So, since I'm being very disorganized right now, and just kind of like blogging, I guess, and, sharing with people what it's like, what it's like to have DID for me, because it's different for everyone, I assume. I mean, whenever I was a kid, I didn't even know that there was such a thing. I just got in trouble for referring to myself as we. And that's what triggers the MKUltra mindset memories for me, is as simple as remembering that I got in trouble for calling myself we instead of I, and I wasn't allowed to leave the place that I was taken to until I referred to myself as I, or I don't know, because I had to convince them by convincing myself, and it was a bunch of mind effery. It gets my heart rate going, just thinking about being in those walls. So I'm gonna calm down for a second. And try not to think about it. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls for me, one of several, or possibly many, of describing my DID, is I just don't want to be upset around people. I don't want to seem like I'm losing my crap, because, maybe in my personal downtime. You know, when I need time to myself, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation with yourself if you can work something out at the end of it. What makes it, in my case, act disorderly, more or less speaking, is when it becomes so jumbled and scrambled that I can't do what I need to do. I can't, like, I have a whole list of things that I want to do, that I'd like to do, that I could do, that I'm working towards. But it takes a very long time to mark off some of these things because there's, you know, I wake up one day and I want to build something, and maybe it's electronics, you know, and I understand schematics and electrical workings to a degree that I normally don't, and then the next day I just don't. It's not that I don't remember it, it's just that it doesn't make as much sense to me. I might be in an artistic mode where I just look at things and everything is contrast and what's the word? Abstractions. It's just, the words don't, you know, eventually the words just fade away. They don't even touch it anymore. And, you know, I can see things. If I'm in an imaginative state, you know, sometimes there's like a dissociative state that I trigger accidentally or in a creative manner. Sometimes they, you know, come about like bam out of nowhere, or from a trigger usually, whether I remember what the trigger is or not afterwards, because even if I did remember it, why would I like want to tell somebody what it is? You know, I've been psych-analyzed before. You tell a doctor, yeah doc, if you do this, I'll growl like an animal. So what do? They want to see it. They want to see you growl like an animal. And personally, I am just so heartbroken from the life of living being viewed as an experiment, like an animal, because I'm not. I may have an animal body and instincts, you know, a connection to physicality, to my vessel. But I just don't understand how it is that people can be so afraid of each other and then expect that a human being is going to care for another human being. It's a total contradiction. It's you know, it's going to be one or the other. Generally speaking. But anyway, so I just kind of went on a bit of a tangent, dissociated a little bit, because I was having mental pictures of walking around through the maze and thinking about all the other people who may still and possibly still are there. Because if they weren't, then I would think that somebody would have taken credit for it on television or something, you know, like some politician saying, yes, look what I did. I freed these experimental humanoid beings that you didn't even know existed. You know the world that we live in. If it happened, did they just let us all out quietly, one by one? Or I mean, sometimes for me, when, I think about the psychology of being placed against your will, away from the sun, away from the surface, the air, and to be put somewhere where no one can hear you. No one knows where you are. And if you've seen the technology that I've seen, you get put in a place where you don't probably know for years of being there, in a sense, of how you would even get out of such a situation. Like a Stargate. I'll just reference something. Won't really get too into particulars, but what if there was a wall where somebody has some sort of remote controlled doohickey thingamajig? I don't friggin' know how exactly it worked. Some sort of trick wall, special coated material. You push a button, certain material reacts to it, it reacts in another way. However you want to call it. A special door that opens up to another place where time's different. Whether it's faster or slower. I didn't see any examples of this in the soft exposure media until about a year and a half, 2 years maybe or so ago. Me and my friend were watching the Cube movies. And won't get too into that, but in one of them it gets into time and stuff, and it's pretty trippy. But if you saw the technology that I saw, could you be put in a room for years? Not necessarily just that room, but you go into a doorway and you go through this other place. By the time you go back through that other room, almost no time at all has passed, and no one would believe you. Well, I'm sure many people would, not take my story, what happened to me, my story, as something literal. And you could see it as, hey, you know what, you got taken to a place, they loaded you up full of drugs, they deprived you of sleep. Whenever you were gonna fall asleep, they'd shoot on flashing lights, play siren sounds, alarms, weird noises, squeaks, squelches, pops, whoop 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 whoops, bleep bleep bleep, all that kind of crap. And you have some flashing lights. Dun, 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 dun. Why? What game are we playing here? What game? What have they done to so many people that you don't even know exist because they don't have clearance to speak about it, or they're no longer they don't have a free-ranged vessel to walk around on the surface to communicate with the world that most people see. And again, I think back about all those people. It's something that I've been having to deal with lately, is the memory of their faces. And I don't really want to talk about that right now. I mean, I may talk about it in the next one, perhaps. But, I wanted to, kind of stay on my story, on, my anxiety and depression. I guess I haven't really described the dissociations. Well, I have. I was, kind of getting at, like, what I was saying earlier about how far-fetched the whole time-skew door thing I was referring to. That's in itself, it's a good analogy of what dissociations are like, because I can step into this hypercube that's in my body, but that is my body. My body just shifts really quickly, and then time is different. Either a bunch of time just went by, or could seem to be reverse time. It just kind of depends on how you look at it, through a standpoint of memories and looking forwards and backwards in small ranged time spaces. I mean, it can apply to larger scope range time spaces too, but in small ones, like, let's say 6 hours and 3 hours, and you compare the difference between 3 hours and 6 hours and 15 minutes or something. So you spend an hour feels like 15 minutes, and then 3 hours feels like 6 hours, so how much time just went by? And it's a lot of friggin' math that the average person you probably aren't thinking about this crap. You don't have to plan ahead, like, okay, 5 hours away from now, how many hours away is that if 5 hours equals 10 hours, or equals 2 hours? And that doesn't compute to you, because you perceive time as, you look at a watch and it tells you, and you look at the watch and it tells you again. If I look at a watch, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, I mean, I can read it, but by the time I sit there and read what time it is, it's already been a few seconds later. Do you understand what I'm saying? The hyper literal aspect, where does the line get drawn for the mind? And that perception of reality, some people might think that it's a bad thing or a negative thing to, like, okay, let me give you an example of a positive aspect of a time distortion that some people have more recently, in more modern times. It's known as a power nap, but there are actually ancient techniques to put oneself to sleep for 15 minutes or an hour, or, I mean, it's up to you. I don't want to put like a number on it, but let's just say 15 minutes. And within this 15 minutes, you feel like you had a whole night's rest. How amazing would that be, right? Excuse me. Okay, so if you could sleep for 15 minutes, and it feels like you got 8 hours of sleep, or 10 or 12 or whatever, you just feel fully rested, but you equate in your mind when you sleep based on a number value of time equals the quality, even though that's not necessarily true, because, you know, I have insomnia and narcolepsy, so I might stay awake for like a week or two. Not that I've done this recently, but I have done it. I've stayed awake for like 2 weeks before. That was a pretty bold thing to do, but it gets easy after like the 5th day. But regardless, you know, whether I go a day or without sleep, or sleep for unfortunately longer than I would like to, or just, you know, I get so tired that I can't, you know, sometimes I dissociate so heavily that I just kind of can't speak, and maybe I can't even text anymore, so I just kind of give up on the day and I just go to sleep. You know, like maybe everyone's in a bad mood around me. Wait, did I say that right? Everyone's in a bad mood around me? Everyone is in a bad mood around me. Yeah, anyway. So if, like, the people around me are maybe giving me a bad vibe, not that, you know, like, their vibe's their own, like, that's their business, I'm not trying to, like, say anything, but, like, let's just say they're having a bad day, and I'm having a bad day, obviously, I can't talk, and, you know, if I'm not able to communicate, and maybe they're not being very nice to me, like, that might be another time where, like, it's worse. It makes it worse, because I want to tell them, like, look, I'm not trying to sit here like I'm stupid for, you know, because I want to. I'm like, you know, I'm trying to integrate, I'm trying to heal my past right now. Like, for example, right now, like, you know, I got to a point in my life where I couldn't do the 9 to 5 anymore. I had made myself sick for years. You know, my body, you know, I won't get into the biological aspect of it, but, you know, I would drink so many energy drinks that at the end of my shift, because I would open and close, and then eventually get fired and not get paid my commission. Thanks, bosses. Huh. And, yeah, you know, gotta leave that stuff in the past, but at the same time, you know, you gotta acknowledge that it's real. You know, you have your own life. Not everyone goes through this stuff. You know, your life ain't gonna be like mine, and mine's not gonna be like yours. And I'm not trying to be like a downer, so I really hope, you know, I don't get a bunch of comments of saying, like, oh, you should go check out that, you know, Robinson guy, you know, because, yeah, he's a great speaker, you know, he's funny, very charismatic, and I've studied self-hypnosis myself, but that's kind of another issue. Like, we won't really get into, like, playing around in people's psyches, you know, because what is it that we're fixing here? Because that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this DID thing, is about the shame of it. Because dissociations happen all the time. If you're reading a good book or watching TV, it's you know, your wife's like, hey, can you take out the trash? And you're like, yeah, that voice. And you're all like, and, you know, you're like, what? What did you just say? I was trying to listen, but, you know, this thing was going on. You know, the game on TV, you know, the football game, yeah. Something. something, man. You know, it's a dissociation, and there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, it might be a little better on society as a whole if we were a little bit more informed that we were doing it. But that's another topic, I think. So I'll just leave it at that. For now, anyway. And I'll just say that I shouldn't have to get hung up in my mind because my mind is saying, put I in front of that, put I in front of that, put I in front of that. And then at the end, we walk away, we walk away from it feeling in a little way that I've cheated ourselves. By, not because I didn't want to be my primary host, or associate with my legal name as a singular entity person, but I mean, like, for real, like, come on, like, that is just so... I hope one day, like, people can kind of see past that. There are so many contextual issues with language. It's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed studying etymology so much. Not to see the issues, but because I was trying to reconcile the paradoxes. And in my own mind, and not in my own mind like, oh, only there it's reconciled, but I can't say, here, look in this book, and then look in that book, and then turn to this page, and then read this paragraph, and then if you study this, and if you go and do this experiment here, and you apply it in your life, and you see for yourself, would you see what I see? That may be something that the ancients could do. Some of the ancients, they could... And there's even some great storytellers. Like, man, that's one of the reasons why I love the arts so much, is because some storytellers, they can really bring you to these places that let us see that it's our story, that we're all connected, that you are me and I'm you, and I mean, I kind of went a little spiritual-ish there, but I mean, that's kind of how I see it, living as a being of multiplicity my whole life. If I can have like a bajillion, it's an innumerable amount of what some people call what I call altered states generally, but sometimes can be referred to as identities, because they do have their own individual preferences, likes and dislikes, and can even process information independently as I would almost say like a true type of multitasking system. But if I can have, like, an infinite number of beings being created and being recycled into better versions of myself, my past, my present, my future, my higher self, the forward self, what's behind me, and what's in these omnidirections that we don't even have names for. Or maybe there are names, and, I just wasn't taught that stuff in school. Shame, but whatever, who cares? They're words. And they're good for describing stuff. It's good for piecing puzzles together. But if we put all the puzzle pieces together and we look at the picture and we say, that's life, then part of us forgets that, there's another puzzle over here, and, maybe we should start working on one of them, so that way we can start fixing, not fixing, but, putting together more puzzles, and creating more projects, and then maybe we'll see that life's maybe life is like a puzzle, maybe it's not. Maybe it's making sure I didn't lose my screen here. That auto sleep. Anyway, so I rambled on about a lot of different topics. Some of them were, pretty deep or dark. But, and, there's some people who, they know me for like a week or a month, and I try to tell them, when it's a good opportunity, like, hey, I just want to let you know, I have DID, so sometimes you might not hear from me, or I might not even, speak of the English very good. If you catch my drift, it just might not come out right, or make any sense at all. And if it doesn't, then just please bear with me and ignore it if you gotta. I'd rather you ignore it than get offended if I said something stupid or something that upset you because you're like, what the heck? Multi-dimensional blobby bloop. But I do, I have encountered people, and I still have friends, here and there. I don't necessarily get to talk to them as often as I would like to, but I do get to talk to them and see them here and there, and some I still get to be pretty close with. But anyways, yeah, I usually let people know. Sometimes I guess it freaks people out. I don't usually have people say like, oh, I'm scared right now, or is it like a movie or something, or I don't know. I really don't know what people think. They don't usually tell me. Sometimes if I, am talking with it about a friend, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I know, you told me before. So sometimes I tell people, and I just maybe dissociated while I was mentioning it, and because that happens too. Doing the whole alter thing. It's usually more like after the fact, when I get to hear from all of my selves, all of my sides, when there's not a bunch of people around, for me to interact with, because then it's got to be a little bit more seamless, like more switch, although it could be like click, 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 or, even faster, like a strobe light, which would all depend on, various scenarios, and could be kind of like if there was a blueprint aspect of myself that was good at this, and a different part of me good at that, and there were just all these totally different contrasted areas of myself, and I could turn it into an advantage really fast by that ability to dissociate through thousands of altered states within a couple moments. And science could one day argue that, oh, I'm just looking at my thoughts as they're passing by. I'm just able to see all my thoughts in a different context than most people do. Not necessarily like, I don't know, because it doesn't look different to me. It's just how it's always been, or how it's been since I was very young. And sometimes it glitches, and that's usually what people want to hear about, is not the pros. They're like, oh, so tell me the scary stuff about DID. Like, oh, yeah, so I could, sit down and lose track of time, I'm reading a book, and then I get this wild thought about, I don't know, maybe my own idea. Maybe it had something to do with the book, probably just had to do with a word I read. It just kind of triggered something else. And then my mind goes on this whole imaginal expanse thing. I don't know. Make it up words. And just goes on for a while, and you just start, like, totally losing track of time. And I mean, I guess, like, some people, like, see, I was gonna do this, like, an interview and, like, have people have somebody ask me questions, like, because I get questions all the time, so I'm just kind of, like, asking myself the questions, or maybe I'm not even asking them, I'm just asking them in my head, and I'm, like, saying them to you know, whoever's listening, you know, and my friends and fam. The views, out there, but, crap, I gotta keep my train of thought. That's, like, my number one thing people always getting on me about. Well, actually, my friends, they kind of know how to, like, you know, snap and be like, we were talking about this, and then, oh yeah, and I'm right back onto that. Or, you were talking about this, but you said that. What did that have to do with it? Those kind of questions are extremely helpful for me, having conversations with my friends. So anyone out there who has DID, or you know somebody who has it, yeah, like, if you ever ask or are asked those questions, those are great for me. Maybe they'll work for you. I don't know. Try it out. Whatever. So, I feel better, but also I've kind of given myself, like, a sort of manic state. You know, like, I was depressed. Well, I was mildly depressed because I was upset about things that mostly don't pertain to me directly. Some of the things that do pertain to me directly I've kind of pushed under the rug, so I was kind of upset that I want to deal with those things, but I'm dissociating instead because it's, you know, a defense mechanism, and part of me doesn't want to think about it. Part of me feels overloaded, and I'm trying to tell myself that I'm not overloaded. I can handle it, but there's that reflex that's saying, nope, do something else, think about arts, think about, you know, this project right here, think about that project right here. And I'm not one to really be in the habit of, like, starting a bajillion projects and not finish them, but I do take up big projects that sometimes take a long time to complete. So to me, it kind of makes sense to have a whole bunch of different things, but in the real sense of, like, survival in a modern day, or even in the past day, really, the way society normally works, it's not very efficient in that sort of sense. That, you know, unless if I can make money at all of these things before they're all completed, and then, hey, let's say that I do complete them all, and maybe none of them make any money. You know, for people who ask about, like, my financial situation, you know, I've been a jack of trades since I was a kid, basically. And, you know, I just like to help people. If I don't feel like I'm making a difference at my place of business, then generally what happens is I remember that myself, that I too have feelings, and that I also need help in a sort of sense. And by help, I mean compassion. Someone maybe just to listen or to talk with me. You know, I talk with my friends, but I don't really get too heavy into this stuff. I mean, it depends on the friend, you know, like, if they want to talk about it. Some people get easily triggered and they can't talk about it. For me, I'll get triggered and I'll talk about it and I'll say a bunch of things that'll trigger other people, and they'll, like, kind of flee it. Or that's what it seems like to me, because I don't know. I don't know what's going on in people's minds. I just know that sometimes people seem to act scared. And it's kind of sad, but they're their own person, and they've got their own life to live, and I understand things are intense, and I haven't had a normal life. I wouldn't call it normal. I know some people want a normal life. I know whenever I was growing up, I wanted, white picket fence and a puppy dog kind of thing, but things don't always if everyone has the white picket fence, then what's so great about me having it? That's my opinion. I'm not trying to look down on it, just saying. So yeah, this probably sounds depressing as fudge. So trying not to make this long, and I'm like talking less. Trying to think if there's anything in particular, because there's like a bajillion things that I could say. I could have just like dove in and said like, about my experience being inpatient. I mean, I guess I kind of mentioned it a bit. I guess I'll talk a little bit more about the abuse. I mean, I feel it was not something that was beneficial to my health. It was something that did not benefit me. I would not volunteer for that type of service again. I'll talk about that just a little bit. I'll try not to trigger myself too much, and then I'll just kind of I'll upload this, and I'll listen to it tomorrow, see what I said, what I left out, and then I'll do part 2. If you have any questions about anything in particular, you could put that in the comments, or send me an email if you're, you feeling a little shy. And if it has to do with the DID, maybe I'll put that in the next video if I haven't already done one or finished however many I was gonna do about it. Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I don't really. There's just such resistance right now. Part of me is fighting, saying, nah, think about something else. Don't think about being back at that horrible place. Don't talk about that horrible place. They threatened you that if you ever talked about what happened there, they would make sure that it would be worse next time. Part of me remembers that, they threatened my family, even though my family, after telling them for years about how it was one of the things that stopped me from speaking about it, have told me, look, you gotta do you, say what you gotta say if that's what you gotta do, we support you. So I know that a lot of these threats, they're not valid anymore. But I was programmed not to speak or even write about it. Like, that's one of the things is, like, if I speak about it, I'll probably have a dissociation. But if I try to write about it, it's like I get hit with, like, an amnesiac state. Bam, bam, bam. I go to reach for a pencil, and I'm almost paralyzed. Like, my limbs almost won't move. And I mean, I could write down whatever, you give me a phone number or something, I can write that down, but it's like let's say it's some inspired thing, or maybe it's something like super triggering. Like, those are the times where I'll actually be like, I'll feel the loss of motor function in my arms to some extent. Like it gets shaky. I mean, I can hold a glass, but, like, let's say if I was like, whoa, this feels really bad, then if I did have a glass material, breakable drinking cup in my hand, I would be putting that down. Because I'm clumsy. I drop stuff that I hold. People who know me know. I drop stuff. And I bang into walls and all kinds of stuff, and it's like I didn't even feel it. Which, yeah, that's probably on my file at that place that kept me too, because, when they dope me up on stuff and, were torturing me in the sense that they wouldn't allow me to sleep, they had me on experimental medication that they didn't even know what was going to do to me or to anybody, because it wasn't even, like, a lot of the medications that I was on there and after, years after, were not available to the public for a couple years, like, after I was 18. Like, around the time I was 18, some of the drugs were available to people only over 18, and it's like, well, how many years was I on that crap off and on? Yeah, and who knows what kind of irreparable damage that those kind of things could do. But oh no, don't talk bad about big pharma. That's no. Or at least it used to be. I don't know where the freedom of speech, how much of that's left nowadays. I know there's enough people who are raising their voices so they can't shut us all up anymore, and algorithms are going wild or whatever. Like, I don't know, I won't get into the technicals, but yeah, I bounced around on the walls at one point in time. They put me in a room, the first room that they put me in, there was it was a big opening, there was nobody in it. It would be like a main unit that you would put, like, a bunch of people to commune in if it was in an open branch of where I was. And then there was a couple other doors that were leading off of the one that I came from. Those were all, for the most part, locked. Some of them weren't, but I'll get into that later. In the first room they put me in, it had a little bedroom. I said little bed, but there wasn't actually a bed there, but it was this little bedroom. It was like a little closet or a nook. And they gave me a piece of paper as part of the things that I call torture, and because I'm not going to, like, necessarily say, like, like, this stuff, it would be hard as crap to prove, and I'm sure if this paper exists, they're not going to show it to anybody. But there was a piece of paper that they made me sign that said I assassinated Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, or blah 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 blah, like all this crap. And, I mean, obviously I didn't do it at first. I thought that was ridiculous. I was like, what do you, I was an honest kid. I was like, why, why would you ask me to do such a thing? That doesn't make any sense. But in order for them to release me, that was part of the conditions, is, I had to pretty much beg them. I had to sign a confession that I shot Abraham Lincoln, although under conventional circumstances that would be totally preposterous. And I'm not saying I did, like, F all, but I did have to sign a piece of paper. Okay, so I'm not saying that I did the things on the confession, but I'm saying that I was tortured into signing a confession that I did things such as that. But see, the thing is, if okay, I'm trying to, I'm dissociating, but I'm trying not to. If you're given a piece of paper and you're not given a pen, and somebody says, okay, I'll let you out of here, all you gotta do is sign that piece of paper. Well, you think, after you've been tortured for a while, you'd be like, well, I'm just gonna sign this fucking piece of paper, I don't give a crap about it, excuse my bump. I said one bump, or whatever you call that crap. So, yeah, you know what? Kids shouldn't be watching this crap anyway. I was a kid when it happened to me, but anyway, I'm not gonna freaking censor myself, but obviously it's the internet, and I'm not like trying to like bloom, shoot them out there. Okay, so okay, the piece of paper. So you'd think after all the weird crap they were doing to me that I just signed this friggin' piece of paper, because I didn't give a crap about what it said. I just wanted to, save myself at a certain point. Room 101, 404. Alright? Expunged. So just want to get the heck out of this friggin' room. You think I would sign this piece of paper, but there's no pen. Give me a pen. Give me a pen. There's no pen. You don't know how long I ran to, probably in in a seclusionary room because I wasn't receptive to their programming. Saying that. I mean, resistant to the programming. I mean, I got hit really friggin' hard, but I tried resisting. I only really had states in and out of lucidity. Like, that's kind of the thing is like, my life is lucid. I'm living it. If I'm having a day where my mind is in a mental fog, I know that my mind is in a mental fog. It might take me 6 hours to realize it, but I'm surely gonna realize, I was kind of kidding about that last part, like, I mean, yeah, I could dissociate really heavily for, like, hours, but, anyway, I'm not gonna get into the particulars about when you can tell if it's coming on or not, because that's, oh my god. I mean, if you have it, listen to this. I probably triggered you like more times than friggin' most modern television commercials or shows or something. I don't know. And by triggered, I'm not necessarily saying like a bad thing. I mean it is a bad thing in a lot of connotations as it's used more commonly now. But it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's, it's an aha moment trigger. But anyway, I'm starting to sound even more negative. So, I went from not being sure to having a manic episode to now I'm kind of feeling a little down because I've ranted a little long, although that's what this whole thing was about, and I was planning on it probably going for a half an hour to an hour anyway. I just wish that it made more sense and was more organized, but yeah, I don't know if I said in the beginning, but yeah, the whole disorganized schizophrenia thing, yeah, that comes up sometimes. You know, I organize stuff for people sometimes, so I don't usually like to say, like, yeah, I have disorganized schizophrenia, but let me help you organize a really important event. So, I wish I try to be honest, but it's really hard to function in a world that is so shallow. Like, I'm not saying that, like, everyone's shallow or that everything is shallow, but, like, the world that I was born into, it was very shallow. And some of us are seeing that things are deeper, and that, you know, there's a sky, too, and, you know, so if we don't want to be in water, we don't have to be, but I think that's gonna be the end of the first one that I did. Hopefully it helps somebody. I don't know if I feel better saying anything about it or not. I mean, I'd like to say, oh yeah, I do, or I don't, you know, have an answer, but I really don't have an answer. Like, right now, I don't. But I will try to leave the comments up. Hopefully there won't be, you know, a bunch of ignorance. By ignorance, I mean, like, hateful, spiteful crap. Trolling. And, yeah, so I'll leave them up so long as stuff, you know, I don't have to, like, go over there and moderate the crap out of it or something. And, yeah, so if you have a question, go ahead, ask me the question, you know, privately or down in the comments. I'll be happy to answer the best that I can. Sorry if it comes out sounding like a riddle or a broken mess. It will either sound way too short or blah 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 blah, maybe way too long. Unless if I'm having a non-disorganized day, then it might come out sounding kind of poetic, in my opinion. It just all kind of depends on what mode I can be in, and or get myself in, because I am an alchemist in a sort of sense. You know, I learn. You know, I have to shift. You know, sometimes I get to a point where I've got to shift myself, my own awareness, to another state. You know, you got to go with the flow of life, and you got to be observant and be in that receptive energy, but you've also got to create and project. So I try to create my own life and not necessarily be an effect, but I'm human too. That's another thing people will probably want to know about. Maybe next video I'll talk about the hybridization and more about the MKUltra in specific, rather than specifically what I was referring to in this about my, you know, what triggers me easily, me, as to, you know, why I might lose my train of thought really easily trying to talk about this stuff. why it's going to be so hard for me to talk about. Because it will be. It's going to be really hard. But maybe it'll get easier with time. Maybe it'll get easier for all of us to talk about, because I know that my story is not entirely my own. I mean, I know that my own story is my own, but that there are other people who have been through similar unfortunate circumstances or situations, and they may have even been, played a role that they didn't want to play, and I understand that. So I'm gonna do this with as much love as I can. I hope you all will be there with me.